It's quite hard to know where to begin tonight. I think where I want to begin is to say that actually it's almost a year to the day since Women's Place was formed, and I think we've come a very long way, so happy birthday to Women's Place UK. When we formed, there was a hashtag which was "There's no debate." No debate was the hashtag about trans women are women. Hashtag no debate. And I think that what we have done is we've opened up the debate and we have made a debate happen, and we are on a long journey, but we will carry on making sure that debate takes place. So where do we start then? I'm going to start with a tweet. I often go back to Twitter because it represents something, not everything, but something. And I was just going through some tweets tonight and noticed that Callum says, it has to be a man, Callum says, "Trans women are women, you fucking bigoted arsewipe." It's not unusual for me to get that sort of tweet aimed at me. I know that I'm not the only one, and that we all face this kind of online sexism and vitriol. But it was in response to my questioning, actually Clive Lewis, an MP, who said that anyone who opposed trans women being all women shortlist was bigoted. So you can see how this works. It works with one powerful man saying that's bigotry, and then with the second man saying we're arsewipes, or, insert the term TERFs, whatever. There is a licensing going on by some men. Unfortunately, some of them are powerful men in the Labour Party, and they need to be held to account as well. So this fight is for our political space as well as anything else. It's for us to have the right to be part of political life, to be part of political debate and be part of public life. And that is not without importance, because obviously we still do not have equal rights 100 years after the suffragettes to equal political participation and equal political representation. And anybody who is trying to say that all women shortlist was something that we fought for, that battle is now run. Anybody trying to say that there is equal female participation is clearly somebody who is not really taking very much notice. So we still have to fight for equal political representation, and we still have to ensure that women have got the rights to be represented in Parliament, in the Labour Party, in the trade unions and across the piece, and ensure that people like Anne are there representing us in local communities. And if we argue that case, we found that we are being silenced. And clearly, 100 years after the suffragettes, the silencing of women is something that is really quite serious. And so we really do have to look at what is this movement that is saying that women don't deserve that equal political representation. Instead, they should give that space over to trans women, and we really don't care how few actual biological females are represented. And that ideology actually does, as Debbie has outlined, harm trans people as well. And I think we have to look at the movement and say that there are very specific interventions by men or trans rights activists, some of them women, but the majority, I think, who are most vocal are men or male. Very specific interventions into feminism to try to undermine and blunt feminism. Trans politics, as we can see it at the moment, and as it plays out at the moment, is systematically used against feminism. It's used against feminist demands, and it is particularly viciously used against individual feminist women. They demand that women give space on all women's short lists rather than acknowledge that men should give space to underrepresented groups. They demand that women do not refer to female biology and say that it's hurtful for us to do that. And you see people trying to dance around terminology so that women cannot name themselves. They seek to denigrate female protest. So they argue against the light-hearted use of pussy hats as a form of protest against Trump. in a way of undermining women's protest and organisation. They complain in the recent Irish referendum on abortion rights that the campaigning was too much about women and too exclusionary, and therefore learn your place, women, because arguing for reproductive rights is something that excludes men. They try to silence individual women in a very vicious way. They try to push us off the public stage, to shame us. They write to our employers. They complain and target our platforms wherever we gather. We appear, as a Women's Place UK, to be getting past that point, but trans activists have routinely rounded on Mumsnet, target the advertisers on Mumsnet, target other feminist meetings, have targeted our meetings. They target individual female journalists. It's great to have Janice here tonight. Thank you for coming along. But they pursue some women who've spoken for women's rights for literally decades, the likes of Julie Bindel, for instance. So they are absolutely determined to silence the feminist movement and to target individual women. And so we have got to think about why. What is that about? They picket and disrupt our meetings. They pursue women going about their political activities, even when they're not related to campaigning on women's rights. So we know, for instance, of women who've been on picket lines, who were recognised as being at a meeting or one of our meetings and were hounded off their own picket line, as Lucy has outlined. They assault women by battery. The cases have gone through the courts. That was a year ago. They dox women, and we know that Natasha Kennedy, for instance, is a trans rights activist who has organised online intimidation and secret Facebook cells to harass women and to set up blacklists. We, as members of the Labour Party, and I'm going to remain in the Labour Party, I'm going to make sure this issue is sorted out and that feminism is reclaimed in the Labour movement. But they have organised a blacklist of women members in the Labour Party. And as has already been outlined, no one has been disciplined. There's been some hand-wringing. There's been some, that's a bit alarming, we're a bit concerned by that. But absolutely nothing has happened. No disciplinary action has been taken. So my name's on that list. There will be women in this room as well whose name is on that list as being people who are beyond the pale and being doxed. They demand the silence of female academics, feminist campaigners, women everywhere, in general. Just be quiet, don't speak. So this activism has to be considered, and it amounts to a framework of activism that places the interests of men or males always before the interests of women. So they place the female right to self-organise, to be in meetings. That is secondary to the male right to intervene in these spaces and to be treated as women in these spaces. And TUC Women's Conference, my understanding is that there are trans women meetings at TUC Women's Conference, which if you think that through is utterly bizarre, because those meetings are male separatist meetings in a women's space. There are female rights to critique, the female right to critique the prison of gender and conforming to femininity. That comes second to the right to embrace femininity for males. The female right to describe ourselves and our body under patriarchy comes after the male right to redefine our bodies and to demand that we change our language around our bodies. The female right to participate in policy and representation comes after the male right to greater representation. The female right to legal exemptions to protect our spaces comes after the male right to appropriate those legal exemptions. So all of this is amounting basically to a gathering storm. A tsunami is far out at sea. And I would argue it's going to crash into public life. And that's why there are more and more of us, and why this debate is so heated, because many of us can see where this leads. It leads to male rapists in female prisons. It leads to public space being completely without any safeguards. All intimate care, all changing facilities are an open season. It leads to cross-dressers who become named as top 100 female executives, even in a company where the pay gap is absolutely huge. It leads to 4,000% increase in young girls transitioning. So we have to argue that it's fundamental to our movement that we keep going, that we're 1 year old, but that we don't accept that we have got there yet. And I just want to end on a quote, which is from Mary Beard, who, like hers, is given a hard time on Twitter. And she was sent a message: "I'm going to cut off your head and rape it." How very Shakespearean, she replies. And she points out the enforced muteness of women through ancient times. And in Titus and Andronicus, Lavinia is raped and her tongue is cut out and her hands are chopped off, so that she may not speak. Well, we will speak. And if the battle is bloody and hard, then we will do it, because throughout history, women have had to find their voice, and we are not going to give it away now. Thank you.